Okay, so last time I was able to do this, I have not taught for quite some time, and I'm starting to feel it, so I'm very happy to teach tonight. But last time I was able to do Bible study, does anybody remember what we were doing when I did it last time? I heard Genesis. I guess that's a right answer. It's kind of a derogatory answer too. Well, I guess just in general. The last one just indicative of what we've been in generally. Okay, yeah, I'm here now. Yeah. So we've been kind of doing this headship, hierarchy, authority, and then how it obviously builds into the family, and not even just the family, but men and women. So that's what we've been doing. So last time we primarily dealt with men last time. And hopefully that was helpful. I know there was a lot that we covered, and really for most of it, we've really just been skimming the surface. I mean, it's all introductory stuff. This should be stuff that over the years becomes 101 for us as Christians. This is not, nothing we're going to go through. It may be profound in the sense that it's God's Word, and maybe profound in another sense that you may hear things and read things and see Bible verses that you haven't seen or maybe understood before. But as far as its newness in the church, nothing that we've been talking about is new. This is not a development in the last 50 years. This is not a response to anything. This has really been Christian doctrine and teaching for two millennia and even beyond that, since the beginning of time. So tonight we want to deal with this issue of hierarchy, authority, and submission. But like I said before, we kind of did this backwards. We could have started with the Bible's teaching on the family and then worked out, kind of like as an inner circle, and then out into, outer circles to men and then women, and then some proper principles and things. But I thought it'd be maybe better to do it the other way that we've done it. So tonight I want to talk about women. So once again, last time we did this, for you men in here, this was primarily directed at you, but I told all of you ladies in here to not check out on something like this. Though much of our conversation will, as we move into even the fourth one, will revolve around the family, it is not disconnected from you. If you don't have a family, or you're not married, or you don't have kids, it is not disconnected from you in the slightest. In fact, I hope we'll see that probably even to a greater extent with talking about women than we even do with the men. There is such an assumption in the Bible when the Scripture speaks of family, and it speaks of the relationship between husband and wife, and the character that needs to be built up, the roles, the responsibilities, the nature of each one. It really assumes not just, yeah, you're married, or yeah, you have kids, now start acting like this. It really assumes as you as a man and you as a woman have already understood yourself, you've principled yourself on certain things, and you've built yourself up on the way God has structured the world, so that when you enter into those relationships, when God gifts you those relationships, you act appropriately in those, right? You don't start acting appropriately the minute you become a father, at least hopefully not. In movies, it's a good thing to applaud, the guy who's had a really hard life, and then he either gets married or he has a kid, and it's a total surprise, and, we cheer about it, and it's not a bad thing to cheer about. Someone wants to square their life up, and they want to do what's right. That's a good thing. But brethren, we don't want to be that as Christians. We don't want to be people who all of a sudden are trying to fit into size 10 shoes, and we're still walking around in kids' shoes, right? We don't want to try to fill britches that are too big for us, so to speak. We don't want to jump into something we have not prepared ourselves to be in the first place. So just because we're going to talk about women tonight does not mean men, this is time for you to just, let me nudge my wife a few times, or, ladies, really pay attention. So, yes, ladies, pay attention tonight. But men, at the same time, you have daughters in here. You have young ladies in here who are your brothers and your sisters, not your brothers, but you know what I mean by that. The catch-all term right there, brothers, universal. You are all, to some degree, and this is the beauty of the church, you are responsible for one another. I am responsible for Nicolette just the way that Manny is, or Henry is, or Michelle is. I mean, whoever. We all, to a degree, have responsibility in the forming of one another in this church. And so don't think for a minute, because this may not talk about, I don't have kids 5 under 5 or whatever it may be, and I'm not, buying, it's like, we can't think that way. We cannot develop that kind of attitude in the Christian life, because the Bible certainly does not hold out those things as the only time that if you're in those stations, you have to think about what we're going to talk about. You as individuals need to consider how you've been made by God and how that means you interact regardless of whatever situation you guys are in. So I'm not going to rehash any of the stuff that we did with the men, because I think it was sufficient last week. And go ahead.
Can we just hit the points again?
You're asking a dangerous request. Let me sum it up in 30 seconds.
She's got the points. It was Savior.
As far as men?
What was just the Savior, dominion,
culture.
What was it?
Dominion, culture, saviors, a wise ruler, and glory
Bearers, but yeah, we got it. Okay, we got him. No, amen. So that was the general shape of men, is what we call. This is the general shape that men are made. And hopefully the point that we really honed in on the intro last week is we don't want to become Gnostic, brethren. God made us body and soul. The two are never mixed, but forever will be united. I mean, that's our biggest hope. Or your biggest hope in the world is not airy, spacey heaven. It's heaven and earth united as you receive a resurrection body in glory, dwelling on the earth, because God's come down to you. I mean, that is literally your hope. At least it should be. So we need to be careful that as we begin to talk about these things, we don't become Gnostic in the way that we think about these things. We don't have a disconnect from the way God has made the world. It's not going to be any different than how God finishes it. Glorified, yes. Differences, yes. But fundamental at its core, what you have in the beginning is what the end is pointing to. We're looking to dwell and walk with God in our physical, resurrected bodies. So as we talk about what it means to be a man and a woman, and even in discipleship this week, this was actually kind of providential. One of our chapters was when you get to heaven, and when you get to the new heavens and new earth, resurrected body, you're not going to be a androgynous being. You won't be, no one's going to look at you and go, there's Manny, but I don't know what he is. I mean, you're going to look at Manny, and Manny's beard will probably be 10 times more glorious than it is now, and you will know Manny is still a glorified man. And we will look at all of you sisters in here, glorified in beauty, and go, that is our sister. That's a woman. That's not going to change. Now, as we also talked about this week in discipleship, what that means in every situation, we don't know. You guys can save that question, but I already give you my answer now for one of our Ask Anythings. What's heaven going to be like? I don't know. It's going to be great though. But you will still be a man and a woman. So this is important. We don't want to be disconnected. So let's jump into these. We have a lot. There's a lot to read. And I really want to get to all these. So, I want to spend as much time on these as we can, but hopefully some of these are a little bit, nothing I'm going to say hopefully is like, whoa, never considered that before. But hopefully when you put all these together, it's, if I just gave you guys one of these, not going to do you a whole lot. But you start putting 5, 10 of these things together, it's like getting all the pieces together in a puzzle. You start to see the big picture. You start to see, okay, this is how women, this is how you guys have been made. And it'd be good for us to see this. So here is a few points on the general shape of women. So first one, and we'll be back in Genesis, of course, to begin. Genesis 2:18, if someone wants to flip there. Genesis 2:18, and then if you have it, just go ahead and read it. If you're the first one there, be loud, proud, and let it rip. But this first point is that women are helpers.
Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him."
Okay, sorry, you stopped.
You
Thanks.
said 2:18.
You were right. It ended so abruptly. I wasn't ready for it. Okay. What? Someone give me the basic gist of Genesis 2:18. Why did God form Eve? Okay.
Man claim dominion over it.
Okay, yeah, yes, right? Okay, so let's clarify two things here from the get-go, because some of these won't need them, but I think this one does need some clarification. While I don't think the word helper is a bad one, I think there's a couple of things we can make clarifications on and distinctions. Often when we think of helper in our modern day context, we think of someone lesser, right? If I say, you're my helper on my job or my mission or my task. Okay, Sergio, right? Okay, sorry, brother. I was trying not to look your way, but right now you're helping out Nick, right? But even though you are helping out Nick, right? The way that you're helping out Nick is you're helping Nick complete a task, even if you're describing tools for him, right? That's right. Amen. So, but what we typically think of those when people look at what Sergio is doing right now and learning, because he's having to learn, people will look at that and they go, oh, he's lesser than Nick. He's not doing the actual plumbing. Oh, he's lesser. And brethren, we have to get rid of that. That is a completely American, I guess not totally American, but that is just, we think of someone who does a lesser job as a lesser person. We almost like equate the two naturally. So that if you excel or you climb in another job, you've somehow elevated like your status. And don't think the rest of the world doesn't think like this. You think of, over the years, India gets talked a lot about. If you're ever thinking about, where do missionaries, need to go, or where do people always dream about going? India is a huge one. And what do they have going on there among their social classes? What do they have? Caste, right? And depending on which one you're in, you actually are a better human being depending on which one you are in there. Literally, like if you're fit to help, you are lesser. If you're fit for royalty, you are actually a greater human being. And we need to be careful when we read this. And I'm making this clarification not because I think anybody here thinks this, but we do need to be careful when we start talking about hierarchy, authority, and submission. Brethren, I will not be the guy to drop this one until the culture sounds different, but we have to take certain stands on this, that the culture is you just need to know from the get-go, they are not going to approve. I mean, most of you ladies wanting to stay home and raise children, you are never going to find approval. I mean, don't even try to seek it. Like, you're not going to find it in your context. You need to live it out in boldness and faith and in courage, because you're just not going to find that. The world's going to look on at you with shame. But we need to consider that as we are defining these things, and yes, we want to hold on to that truth, right? Women have been primarily made for the home. Amen. We can all amen that truth. We want to be careful. We also don't, because these exist too. I'm going to call these people some red-pilled conservatives or red-pilled patriarchalists, or however you want to define them. These are people who take something we hold to be true and they take it to an extreme, to where some people really do. I mean, women, they would really look at you as like, no, your place is, you have a place, and for you to go outside of that place is actually to step outside of not only how God has made you, but like you don't really have like a lot of say-so in there because you're not really worthy of that space. Like there's a real worth-value distinction that people make, even people who, if we were to look at, are a little bit more closer to us than what we think about the rest of the culture. And we need to be able to even say then, no, we're not going down the road where, the dumpster fire is just blazing hot. But we don't have to go follow them, and we don't need to act like, somehow we can be okay with that. We need to speak clearly on both fronts. And I think this text is one of those that is helpful, not to do a pun on it, but saying that I will make a helper fit for him. You guys may have a note there, right? So every Bible should probably have this. Most of your guys' Bibles do. It's not even a cross-reference. There's just a note as to maybe a reading of that word right there, where it says corresponding to. And just the idea is, when God says it's not good that man should be alone, I will make him a helper fit for him. Yes, God is making Eve to come help the man. But he is also making a helper that corresponds to Adam, right? Adam cannot fulfill the Genesis 1:28 mandate by himself. He can't do it. I mean, so if you look at him, it's not God like God messed up. God did not intend in making the man for him to just be the lone ranger. One, he just simply can't produce. And two, it's also to show, like, men, you can't take dominion, like we talked about last week, without the woman. I mean, that should humble. I mean, that's a mind-blowing thing for when this would have been written. Can you imagine Moses in his day writing this down for the people, and then the people learning this? I mean, that is just that is an unheard of thing back in that day. To look at men and to say, you need a helper suited or corresponding to you and to your role. You need the woman. I mean, just think about that. I mean, some people probably have a hard time saying, yeah, we need women, right? Because they've just reacted so strongly to the culture. They want to go, well, we don't need women. We don't need feminists. We just need tough, dominion, men, going out there and taking. And it's like, well, no. We do need men, and we do need them to take dominion. And you know how we need to accomplish that? By women next to our side. So, ladies, I hope that's an encouragement for you. Yes, the Bible is clear on this, and this is 1 Corinthians 11, 8 through 9. This is how the NET puts it, and I like how it puts it. This is how pause right there. This is how the NET puts the Genesis verse, and then we'll go to the Corinthians verse. Here's how the NET puts the Genesis 2:18. The Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a companion for him who corresponds to him." I know that sounds actually kind of woodeny for the NET. It's usually pretty clear. But just try to get that idea across. This companion is made as one who corresponds not only to him as a man, but to his lack or his weakness. And that is, he can't carry out the mandate by himself. He's insufficient to do so. So, but we also get this affirmed for us by Paul, and I think Paul also adds a little bit of clarification here in affirming this as well. So 1 Corinthians chapter 11, 8 through 9, I'm just going to read this one because we have more you guys can turn to. And Nick has dealt with this section in a Bible study on head coverings, but there's a principle here that is vitally important. So here is Paul, beginning in verse 8. He says, "For man," so Adam, "was not made for woman." Okay, what's sum that up? Who was made for who? All right, and that's what he's going to go on to say. Adam was not made for the woman. All right, that's not the ordering, and that's not the design either. That's not the intentional design. Verse 9, "Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man." All right, and then he goes on as to why the head covering principle applies. This is why a wife ought to have a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head, is because of this ordering. And notice that it's not even just chronological, because Paul does that, right? How does Paul do it in 1 Timothy? Why does he say that women should not rule or have teaching authority in the church? Who was made first? Adam. And then Eve. So there he goes to the chronology. But even here, Paul says, listen, man was not made from woman, but woman for man. Notice, he's just talking about origin, right? Who originated from who? Neither was man created for woman, right? So let's just say, for instance, I don't know, maybe it doesn't work. But if Eve was created first and then Adam, right? Even if that were and Paul is stating right here that the intention in creation was that the woman would be made from man so that the woman could come alongside and be the helper to the man. So, ladies, this is something that even is, I've seen, I think this would be hard for even you ladies or anybody you know who is in a good, somewhat solid, decent, biblical church who preaches the gospel and has, biblical church, all these different things. even for ladies to hear that, I think even for men to hear that, I mean, do some of you not get a little weird about hearing that? Ladies, you were made to help, period. Stop. I mean, does not kind of make you squirm? I mean, it's God. It makes me a little bit. To have to say that, to get up and to say, ladies, you were made to help the man. I mean, hey, sisters, can I get an amen or something? I just feel like you're all looking at me, no, I've never thought that before. I mean, is that not true to some extent? Does it not make you kind of go like, I know that's true, but it's like even just a little squirm. I mean, you think about it. We grew up in an age, and I'm not trying to evaluate anyone's past or anyone's parents. Just hear me out on this, okay? But I mean, we even grew up in an age where you think of the boomer generation and kind of the generations that have followed from that. So, maybe one before me, like, 40 years old, 40 years of age, or mine, 20 to 30. I mean, you just think about the main example that the last few generations have saw, and that was, well, in order to live the American dream, mom's got to go into the workplace, so mom and dad both work. And listen, hear me out on this. My mom worked, okay? Love my mom to death. Ask me if I'm a mama's boy. I am. Okay, so hear me out on this. I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad about this or offer any kind of judgment. I'm just making an observation. And now think about the context you fall into here, ladies. You're made to help. I mean, brethren, listen. There are women in good churches who would just not okay with that at first, regardless if they say it or not. I mean, that's just a hard. That just has totally rammed in to even the greatest generation, that's ever been on this planet, the World War II generation, the boomer generation. I mean, brethren, people can have blind spots, right? And we can see areas in which we have inherited an idea about how men and women function. And then when the Bible comes and approaches that and touches it, can make us, even in the most conservative places, makes me feel all kind of weird to even say that. And you guys, this is one of those things I said last time for the men. This is where, this is a thing that goes back for me and Nick, and has always been a back and forth, whether I've learned something or he learned something or Manny's learned something or we've all learned something, is we said this with the sovereignty one. If you come up against the Word of God, your ideas or your feelings or your thoughts come up against the Word, who's going to win out? Right? It's got to, brother. And you got to be convinced of that. Anytime we bump, the Word's got to win out on this. And sometimes that doesn't happen by just reading it one time. Sometimes that means, okay, I recognize this biblical truth is bumping into me, maybe for some, not almost at all, a little bit, maybe some more than others. I mean, it's going to happen as the church grows over the years. And you need to go, the one who wrote this is good, right? God is good in this. God didn't just, ladies, sorry, you got to be a help, but trust me. I mean, he didn't even do that. He's like, I made you this way. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen some of those new photos of the outer space pictures. I don't remember what they were called. They came out like a month ago or something. I don't remember what the name was. Was that what it was? Was it it was some photos about like deep outer space, and the quality of these compared to even the ones that the Hubble Space Telescope got. I mean, brethren, it's breath. I mean, you can't even. You think it's fake. You look at them and like, no, dude, some dude drew that. That's not. Every flat earther out there is like, no, it's not real. They drew that up, and it's like, no, brethren, listen. You will marvel at that. And then you get down to thinking, well, God made me a helper. And you want to think the designer didn't look at you when he made you a woman and go, trust me, this is a good design. And brethren, don't marvel at Hubble or space pictures if you can't accept that truth. Like, just don't. Because the one who made that certainly didn't arbitrarily make you a woman. He didn't. And he said, you will receive the maximum amount of joy in your life, and I will receive the maximum amount of glory if you accept that and you embrace it for all that it is. So, ladies, I know that's a hard one. I'm not trying to, I am. I'm going to mansplain it because the Bible's given us authority to do. But you know what? I'm not trying to say it as someone who's cold and indifferent. I get it. I have my own things that I have been indoctrinated with that I am still having to just constantly remind myself the Bible says different. And you've been made this way. Look at the God who made all the other things, all those universes, those crazy billions of galaxies. What does that even mean? I mean, he made you, brethren, too. Don't forget that. So he made you to be a helper. You should glory in that. So second one, someone wants to turn to Titus. We'll kind of be in Titus a bunch, and 1 Timothy. We'll kind of hang out there for some of these, and then we'll be in the Proverbs kind of on the second half of these. But someone want to read Titus 2:4. Okay, that may seem like, huh? But no, I don't worry, I got something. Someone read it one more time, Nicolette.
And so train the young women to love their husbands and children.
Here, I'll really yell it to you. So train the young women to love their husbands and children. Pretty basic command here. But listen, there's a bunch, but so you think about Paul. I mean, Paul teaches this in a number of different places, and now you can find examples of this. You can find somewhat parallel passages to this, but you can't find a whole lot. It's not like the Bible's got 50 of these. It's it's got a handful maybe. But brethren, listen. When Paul is saying this, Paul is not deriving this truth out of nowhere. He's reflecting upon God's works and God's revelation, coming to these conclusions. So when he tells Titus what he ought to do, right? He said, right? Before this, he's telling older women are to be reverent, behavior, not slanderers. And then here's what they're there to teach. The basic thing that older women are to teach, what is good. I mean, you can look at it's kind of clumsy here in the ESV. They could honestly render this a lot better. I don't know why they render it the way that they do here, because it makes it look like it's two different ideas. Teach what is good, and here's this thing over here. No, what he's telling them to teach that is good is directly related to what follows. So train the young women to love their husbands and children. Brethren, listen, the reason Paul can tell Titus to do this, to command the older women to do this for the younger ones, and that their main focus should be two things. Train young women to love their husbands and children is not, once again, I've been saying this a million times and I hope it burns into your mind, is not arbitrary for him to command them. Why can Paul tell Titus to tell the church this? Brethren, it's because women, you've been made to be nurturers. To love something, biblically, is to nurture something. And what do we mean? What does nurture mean? If I'm saying, you guys are supposed to nurture your wife, nurture your husband, or nurture your kids. What's the meaning behind that? Is to say to nurture something.
Care for.
Okay, care for, and what kind of care, right? Yeah, well, motherly care. Yeah. Sorry, it was way too. I should have asked the question. So motherly care, right? And let's use some examples of this, because here once again we can be conservatives on this and still repeat all these things because we believe the Bible. What does Jesus compare to himself when he's looking upon Jerusalem and he's weeping over Jerusalem? Matthew 23. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I long to what? Gather you as a what? As a hen? Right? Not a big, boating, brutish, man. Yeah, not the rooster coming in and making things, pounding, and you see roosters walk. They walk out with their chests like that, and they put everyone in order. I've seen it. Funny YouTube videos. Don't waste your time on that. But you know what I'm saying? Okay. So, right? He says, as a hen gathers her chicks. Hey, brethren, we don't have to be like liberals who are like, see, God's feminine and we can address God as she. Okay, well, that's garbage. But there's a real truth there that Jesus is saying. And as he laments for something, he laments with such a lament. It's the lament that a woman or a hen, just the feminine, I'm trying to get you to see the feminine quality, would have over her young. So when Paul tells them to love their husbands and their children, I mean, brethren, there are countless examples, especially in the prophets, where God condescends to himself. Yes, often as the bridegroom, but at times coming down as someone who has almost feminine-like care for his people. And we just need to be able to accept that and then also realize, well, I don't think God's making claims that he somehow for ages wanted to be called, father and the masculine pronoun, but we need to think that like God, when he created woman, is drawing off of the created reality to tell his people the kind of love that he has for them. Brethren, he thinks to tell them the kind of love that he has for them is the kind of love that a mother has for her young or a hen has for her chicks. Who nurtures better than anybody in this entire world? Well, God does. And that example, sisters, listen, is this. As you're being trained, older women, as you are doing your best to instill whatever you can, doesn't have to be everything, but whatever you can into younger women, you need to realize that when you instill things into each other, women, as you are learning things from one another, realize that as you are learning to love, you are learning to do the thing that you've been made to do. You have been made in a way that men have not been made to nurture, which is why that yes, the nurturing thing is used at times for men. I'm not trying to say that reality is not in the scriptures too, but often even when it's being applied to men, it's still being derived from the metaphor, the example of the woman, of coming in and taking care of the brethren, coming in and taking care of people, using the woman as the example. And you should, that is something you guys have been gifted and made in that men do not excel in. Men do not excel in nurturing. Men have to learn it. Now, that doesn't mean you ladies don't either. You were taught it, but the whole idea is this. You have been shaped this way to especially do this in a way that provides an example for others. And so you should think to myself, how great, brethren, or sisters, listen, you were not made to nurture, and I'm all for this, but you were not made to nurture trees. You were not made to nurture plants. You were made to nurture, as some people have said, immortal souls, embodied souls, people who will live forever. And listen, we know that men will be held accountable when they die and stand before their Maker for every single action that they take. Nobody's going to stand and be able to blame or point the finger to somebody else. Brethren, we would be foolish to think that the kind of nurture and love that a child receives in his youth does not determine how he's going to go. Is it not? Brethren, I've even just working at Chick-fil-A today, I see it already in talking to some young, foolish kids and already knowing that their home life's a mess, daddy's not around, mom is working, how many jobs or whatever, brethren, and you think about the kind of character, stability, just integrity that they have, and they struggle in it. And yes, will they stand before God and give an account as an individual? You better believe it, they will. But don't think for a second that the way they were nurtured, ladies, that the way those kids were nurtured had no effect upon their life. It most certainly did. So we think, man, I've been made to nurture a husband who in fact will bleed through my whole family, will bleed through the church, will bleed throughout into society. We're all connected, together. And my own children, it'll affect how they grow up. It will even affect how they think of the Lord, how they think of the church. We want to take that one into consideration. Ladies, you've been made to nurture. So nurture and tend the way that a hen would care for her chicks. Have that example in your mind. So third one, someone wants to turn to Titus 2. Well, we're kind of already there. Now I want you to read 3 through 5, get a little broader scope. And then someone needs to flip over to 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 8 through 10. We'll start in the Titus one. So since someone's already at the Titus one, we should already be there. Just someone, let's read that one.
Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior,
Let me ask this. Well, let me say what the point is first, then I'll ask. So this third one then is the shape of women is that you are to be reverent. This ought not to be just a characteristic of different actions you take, but it ought to be something, one, that you imbibe, and two, you are actually, I think, made to shine and glory in. It's been built into you to be reverent women. Now, let me ask the question, what does that word mean? What does it mean to say older women are likewise to be reverent in behavior? What is that word? Like if I say you're ought to give reverence to something. Okay, respectable. Okay, it does, yeah, so along the lines of respectable. What other connotation that it has? So it does have the idea of respect. That's entirely true.
Admiration.
Say that again, sorry.
Sort of admiration.
Okay, yeah, admiration, yes. Honor, okay, yes, okay, yeah, a kind of respect and admiration, but yeah, I think the honor gets into it. And who do we give honor to? Why do we give honor to certain people?
They're appointed to have honor. Right?
This is true, right? So there's an appointment to honor, right? But there's also, we honor honorable people. If I say that's an honorable man, or that's an honorable woman, I'm not just saying that because they have a station, right? It's one thing to show and give honor. It's one thing to look at somebody and say, that's an honorable person. Brethren, you have to show honor to the magistrate, even though the magistrate is often not an honorable, entity or a man or woman, right? And the same thing is along those lines. The reverence in behavior has to do with the respectability in behavior. It has to do with behavior that falls in line according to a standard. And that it would be behavior that is respectable, admirable, and honorable. Something that is worth imitating. Something that not only has the title of reverence, but actually produces, that actually brings about reverence, and not only just for their name, but as he says there at the end of 8, at the end of, at the end of 5, that the word of God may not be reviled, right? So that's kind of the opposite of the reverence right there. You kind of have that bracketed right there, so that the word of God doesn't come under revile or come under scorn or something like that. And so listen, ladies, this idea is, this is a command for the kind of behavior that ought to be characteristic of every woman in the church. Now, obviously, this grows in degrees. Okay, if older women are to be this, and then they're to teach certain things that would earn that kind of respectability, right? Because I think he's saying something like, okay, older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, slave to much wine. They are to teach what is good, which is train young women, all these different things. So the reverent behavior, the kind of behavior that conforms to a proper standard, is what follows. And you notice all the different things that follow. The loving, the nurturing husband and wife. And listen to all these. Self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive, in order that the word of God does not receive revile, but honor, reverence, admiration, because the thing is being lived out, right? There is reverence being produced. And once again, not only is that commanded in those settings, ladies, but this is also something that, once again, it's not arbitrary for Titus to be told, have the older ladies teach and instruct and show the good way to the younger ones. Because this is where your guys' glory lies. I mean, we think about some of these other things. A self-controlled woman, a woman who is pure, one who works at home, kind and submissive. Brethren, those are just not like superior character qualities that some women should have and other women can skate by with, just a few other things. Those are things that women were made to do, right? Women were made for the man to come in and what? To submit, right? In godly submission, right? We could make a host of clarifications or caveats to that, but let's just take the general principle for what it is, right? That is actually how you were made. So all of these things are things that women ought to display because they were built into you. This is how women ought to be, because this is what they are. And one thing, ladies, that we should strive to encourage and exhort as the church is that all of you would be reverent women. That there would be an honorability, an admiration, a respectability, because one's reverence is in conformity to what the Bible would say is reverent, of what is respectable, of what is honorable amongst our people and amongst the world. And so let's go to the 1 Timothy 2 reference now. 1 Timothy 2, beginning in verse 8 through 10, if someone has that. 2, 8 through 10, sorry. All right, I got it. I desire then that in every place... Oh, sorry, did someone start reading?
It was not, I have my span title.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. It would be what nobody else has.
Translate it.
Parse.
No, I'm just kidding.
Verse 8. I desire then that in every place the men should pray, lifting holy hands without anger or quarreling. Here's verse 9. Likewise, so here's command of the women, also that women should adorn themselves, and listen, you're going to get kind of a synonym here. Likewise also that women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel, right? I'm not saying swap this word in because the word's there in Greek. I'm just saying the idea is very similar. That apparel that is reverent, right? That not only shows reverence, but what also can receive reverence, right? You can't receive reverence by being immodest, right? So it just can't happen. That can't happen. So women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel with modesty. And here's some of the same things again. Modesty, self-control, not braided hair or gold or pearls or costly attire, but now this is where it kind of shifts. And it's interesting. But with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works. Now, we have obviously discussed this verse before as it relates to modesty, and rightly so. This is a great passage, and you guys should, if you guys haven't listened to that one in a while, I'd recommend going and listening to it. It's just a good Bible study that we did on modesty. But I think this other point ties in really well with this idea of reverence, because yes, women, you were made to be reverent and to show and to have reverent behavior, but listen, and this could also go for men too, so this principle wouldn't necessarily not apply to men. But there's also a way in which, ladies, you were shaped so that what appears on the outside is a reflection of what's on the inside. I think we would all agree with that, right? What do we do with people when we go down to Main Street and a girl walks up into a dress that I just don't even want to look at her because there's nothing to the imagination? And then she says she's a Christian. I mean, let me ask any one of you in here, how many of you believe her right off the get-go? Raise your hand. Now, not trying to make the final determination, maybe she is. I don't know. But brother, none of you look and go, oh yeah, great Christian woman. She's a great sister. You think there is something fundamentally something's wrong. I mean, something's at the core wrong. This is something's radically wrong here. This goes all the way down to the root. And that's because dress, in the reverence that it ought to bring, I mean, he switches between the two like it's no big deal. He says, ladies, don't dress this way, dress modestly. And then he says, well, don't wear all these things. Do what's proper with those who profess godliness, with good works. I mean, it's like, dress yourself modestly, dress yourself with good works. Those two things are not at odds with one another. Now, listen, I know all the caveats. Can you dress properly and have no good works? You most certainly can. Okay, well, that we should all know that. You can dress a certain way. I mean, guys can get up with clerical collars and be totally theological liberal. That you can put on a suit and tie on Sunday and be sleeping around with someone on Monday. So I get that there are, in a fallen world, those two things are not meshed together perfectly. But, ladies, this is important because I think this actually is tied into your reverence. How you adorn yourself and present yourself on the outside is, in one degree, a reflection upon what's on the inside. And now that would go for men too, but listen, ladies, you need to hear that. I mean, because Paul, for whatever reason, didn't have to look at the men and say that. Now, would that truth apply to men? Most certainly. Guys who wear muscle tees and are all consumed with themselves, right? Are they reverent men? No. Don't look at men like that and think that they're models for young men to follow. Be a big bodybuilder, lift a bunch of weights. I mean, no, that's not reverent behavior. But ladies, listen. Paul wrote this, and he wrote this for a reason to say, women, you should adorn yourselves in respectable or reverent apparel, things that will bring reverence to you, because this is the proper thing for those who profess godliness. This should be a natural bride. Those who profess godliness, reverent. Reverent in dress, reverent in good works, reverent in the heart. I mean, it just pours out of them. It's reverence upon reverence. And I think that's a very important thing to bring out because, once again, we got that Gnostic tendency. I can go do the spiritual things over here, but then the way that I present myself to the world, whether it's in my dress, my speech, my conduct, no. All right? I just deserve reverence because I do all the Christian things. Or I deserve reverence because I'm a woman. Why would you dare talk about a woman who's meek and lowly and weak? It's like, well, no. Rather than listen. The outside should be adorned with what's on the inside, and those two should mesh. Godliness should beget godliness. And ladies, that once again, that should be such an encouraging thing that my whole life I've been made to be this beauty. It's not that you aren't to be a display. It's not that men should never look at you. It's not that you shouldn't be. I mean, it's not. He didn't tell them, hey, don't dress in modest. Go hide in a box. He didn't tell women to do that. You're such a problem. Just go hide. Never show your face. You know, like go dress in garb and just don't only show your eyeballs. Right? And he says no. He tells them, this is how you ought to dress. This is how you ought to be reverent. Be modest and adorn it with good works. Those two are not disconnected. So, ladies, that's how you ought to shine as lights and glory bearers. Is in your outward reverence should match the inward reverence of the heart. So next one, and this will be kind of the last, main one as far as how I think women are shaped. And there's more to these. I had to cut a few out, but I have some ones that are characteristic of these. And this would be one, ladies, you guys are home rulers and home guardians. So let's turn, stay in Titus. Someone keep their finger at Titus because we're going to be right back there in verses 4 to 5. But someone flip a few pages over in 1 Timothy to chapter 5. 1 Timothy 5. And somebody read verse... Let me make sure I wrote this down right because I am second guessing myself. 14. No, that's right. So 1 Timothy 5:14. And let's read that one first. 1 Timothy 5:14.
So I would have younger widows marry their children, manage their households, and give the adversary no occasion for slander.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. Is the command here he's telling younger widows to do, is it some different command that wouldn't already be assumed for people who are already young and married? No. This wouldn't be a different command, right? You wouldn't be like, well, if you're already married and young, do something else. What if you're a young widow? I want you to go get married and then live this way. No, this is how all who are young and married ought to live by. So notice what he says for them to do. So he says, I would have younger widows marry, and then here's what should be brought out of this marriage. Bear children, and then here's the phrase that we'll hone in on, manage their households. So here when he says manage their households, a very wooden way to translate this would be to be a house ruler. Or we could use an older term that we don't really use a whole lot today, a house despot or a despot. It's pronounced different ways, but does anyone know if I said that man's a despot? He's that's the kind of man he is, and he's a ruler. What am I saying if he's a despot or despot, however you pronounce it? What am I saying by that? What is he? Yes, a manager, but there's I think a stronger connotation to that word.
Controller?
Yeah. Okay, controller. Did you have something?
Well, I cheated.
That's fine. Cheat away.
One, exercising power tyrannically.
Yes. So, whoa, yeah. So, yeah. Paul, let's hold the phone, right?
Not mine. Not mine.
Yeah. He just read it. Listen. Paul is drawing off a Greek word that actually carries that connotation in other Greek literature. I mean, you go read we don't use that anymore, but all the old reformers, if you were a tyrant, you were a despot. That man's a wicked despot. It means he is just a power-hungry, tyrannical, stomp your feet all over people kind of ruler. I mean, you think of China, Korea, all those places now. That's the idea. Those are despots over there. Those are not free countries. So obviously, the connotation here is not to say, ladies, become tyrants. Don't do that. Not biblical. But listen to the force that has. And ladies, you may have never have thought this way about and this is why I said this point is about being a home ruler, right? I mean, you said manager, and that's actually fine. The next one we'll go to has that connotation too of a guardian, to be a manager, to be a keeper of something. This first one is even stronger. This is someone who is a house despot. They are a house ruler. I mean, so he's telling them, younger ladies, this is what you're to do. Widows, marry, bear children, be a house ruler. I mean, that connotation there, I think, really kind of changes that. So, I mean, lady, this is what you were made to do. You were not supposed to listen. This really helps us with what I call that pseudo-conservative, that red-pilled, way off in loony town where women really are lesser, right? They really just become lesser. Keep them in the house. Don't let them come out of the house, right? And that's not biblical. I mean, here, these people would have almost no ability to accept this. Ladies, you're home rulers. When your husband's in your home, it doesn't mean your authority's over him, but it does mean you're the ruler of that home to a degree. There's a degree to which you are the house ruler. Your word should go, right? You are to have that kind of status in your home as a ruler of the house. You are not to stay home and bear children and keep the kitchen and keep the house just as a maid. That's not what you've been confined to, right? And we'll get into this as we read the Proverbs. The kind of characteristics that I think flow out of how you guys were made to be. Ladies, to put it really simply, when you think of the ruler aspect, this is where your dominion lies. I mean, think about that. When God tells Adam and Eve, as man and woman, to go and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over birds of the air and over every creeping thing that crawls upon the ground. Ladies, as you rule your house and you have dominion of that house, I mean, that's a much higher call. You're not a maid in your house. You're not just keeping the house clean for your husband. Yes, keep the house clean. That's great. But more importantly than that is that you would rule your house well. That you would have that kind of authority and respect in your house. That your husband would be able to look at you and have that level of respect. And I mean, and husbands, listen, and men in here too, even the boys in here. I mean, as you think about being a good husband, as you think about being a good head over your wife, it doesn't say a lot about us if we rule our house like tyrants, right? If we treat our wife like maids. If our wives are nothing more than to satisfy our urges and our longings, right? There ought to be a respectability given to her because God's made her to do this. She takes dominion here. and husbands, you are to listen. You are to entrust her with that because God has. God has said, this is yours, and you are to go, wife, I love you. And what does it mean to trust somebody? to entrust something to them. You do not trust anybody that you would not entrust something to. Don't lie. Don't be like the world where you have a fake, fake trust, fake loyal, whatever. But at the end of the day, are you going to entrust that thing to that person? Because if you do, you trust them. Men, are you willing to entrust the house to your wives? Do you trust them? And ladies, on the other hand, love and submit to your husband in a way that makes you entrusting, right? I mean, this is a two-way street. This is never one-directional for men always do this or ladies always do this. So this is a constantly, we are self-sacrificing for one another so that loving bond of trust is formed to where we say, God has given you this, I trust you. Now have dominion of this. Rule it well. And ladies, what you've been given dominion over, rule well. Rule well. Because once again, let's say it again, it's not arbitrary. Where is your glory? I mean, it's like, imagine God's promised you to be it's like you're a star in the sky, and He has promised you light and glory that people will awe at when they see it. But you don't have all the luster yet. You don't have all the brightness. You don't have a light. And you ask, well, where do I get it? Where can I plug in to get the glory so that people would stand and look? That is, reverent, like we just talked about. The glory's there. The light shining there. I mean, that is something that literally we would say is awesome. It bears looking at and saying, that is beautiful. And ladies, it's where you can take dominion in what God has given you to do. Don't think it's somewhere else. Don't think it's to be like the man. I mean, that is just looking at, it's like it's being told where the source is and just saying no. I mean, it's as foolish as starving for food and someone says, oh, you get it right there. It's right there. Just go sign up and the food's right there, and you go, no. I mean, what are you going to do with someone like that? Just refuses to do the right thing. Well, there's no respectability. There's no tears shed for somebody like that. And ladies, that's where God has made it. You just plug in, trust not only the promises but the design and goodness of God, and that's where your ruling and your dominion and your glory will lie. So you are home rulers, and the last one is you are also home keepers. You are home guardians. So the Titus, can someone read 4 to 5 really quick? Get to these last couple of things. Titus 2, 4 to 5, whoever has it. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was looking at that text and I was thinking, I looked that up, and it's kind of crazy that word that you were talking about, where it talks about them keeping their house. It says to be the master of a house, to rule the household affairs.
Yeah.
And I'm like thinking, someone could use this verse and really try to say like a husband shouldn't
Rule over his wife.
rule over the house, but the wife should rule over the house.
Right.
And then I was thinking, wait a second, it tells the elders that they must manage their household well. So I was like, let me go over here and look at this and see. It's not the same verbiage.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how they translate it different. Like in this one, I was just thinking of the terms, but in the one of the elders ruling over their household well, it uses the word like to govern, like a governor. And the other one, obviously, is to rule a house as a master. I was just kind of thinking of those different tasks. Like if you have a governor, he may put someone in charge of a task, and they're the master of that. Like if we're talking about, you have a governor, and then you have like Secretary of State or whatever, and that person is supposed to do that task, and he may oversee it, but she's the master of that task, or he or whatever, right?
Right.
So I was just thinking of that, how still you have this hierarchy. You have the governor of the home, and then he puts the master in charge of the home, which is his wife.
Right.
He's still the governor, but he gives her the task of you do this and care for it, and you manage the home. But he manages the home. She manages the home. very.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And it just, that just goes to show you there's no contradiction here in the scriptures with this, but also, too, hopefully this bridges a unnecessary gap we've created often when we, as people who take the Bible seriously as conservatives and want to live out these principles. We really have put the man, like, yeah, he's really up high, he's really up top, and the woman's really down here, just very meager, lowly, servant-like, which servant behavior is not bad, not knocking that, but you know what I mean? Just like a maid in the house. And he says, no. You've been put in charge, and then brethren, listen, I know, I did a job today. I've been put in charge of certain things, and if somebody comes in, if my boss or my owner comes in, and he just starts doing all my job for me, am I in charge? No, I'm not. Am I ruling? I am not. I may have the title, but you know what I am? I'm like kind of how like the Herods were. They were just puppets. These were puppet men in power. They're just kind of doing what they're told for most of the time. They're not really ruling. They're not actually given a domain to actually rule over. And ladies, I hope, one, that puts into perspective, I think, your elevated position. We often have I didn't really know that until a few months ago reading that, go, wow, that's really strong language to talk about women. And man, that should cause you to, think about, okay, you're not managing some household slave. You're not managing a maid. You're managing one in which God's entrusted a very serious task and responsibility with. So you should do that with care. I mean, if I treat my employees wrong, I'm going to have to give some serious account to why I treated them wrong. There's going to be serious consequences for me if I mistreat people. And men, we need to recognize like how we treat our wives and how we let her take on her responsibility and fit into her role is really going to say something about how we rule, right? It's really going to say how our wife is even going to rule. Like, is she going to rule well in the house and be a nurturing, reverent woman? Or is she going to be like you, very domineering, very hands-on and manipulating all the situations? Or will she, be scared and never want to come under any kind of, rulership from you because she's worried about you? And this is a good text to just think like that really elevates you ladies in what you do. And that goes for married or not married. I mean, these are the kind of, when you enter into this kind of, if you enter into a managerial role, do you enter into that role because now they want to then develop the characteristics so you fit the role? No. You get the role because you already exhibit them. You get the role because you exhibit the characteristics and the traits. And so you need to think, that is an aim that he gives to all these young widows and to all the ones that aren't widows, and to say, listen, here's what you ought to do. Be a house ruler. And then the second one here in Titus, I'll just read this really quick so we can get to these last couple things. Verse 4 and 5, so we've hit this a number of times now there, to teach what is good. So train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, and then here it is, working at home. And this is just to be like a house guardian or a house, like a manager of the home. And once again, just this idea that it connotes is, yes, ladies, you're to rule, take dominion here too, but also you're a protector and manager of the home. It's like how the home functions in large part will be reflective of your guarding and keeping of the home, right? It'll show like the kind of fruit it's producing, the things that you keep out of your home, the things that you let in, the things that you allow to be cultivated in the home. I mean, you think about it, that's what a manager does. They are given like assets of somebody, like I've been given in doing this, to say, all right, here's some assets of mine. Now let's turn a profit on this. Let's get some fruit out of this. And you're to go, okay, let's turn a profit on this. And you're supposed to, and to be able to do that, some things got to be out, some things got to be in, some things got to be cultivated, some things got to be chopped off. I mean, you are a keeper and guarder in one sense of that home. I mean, this is really almost getting to like priest-like language here. But you're to be that kind of woman for your home. And this just gets into, I mean, these are all connected as far as, ladies, this is how you are made. It's because nurturers, those who are coming along and helping the man in the dominion thing, I mean, these are all naturally flowing out of this. You have a husband and children that your home protects and that your home cultivates. So a good way to see the way the wind's blowing is stick your finger up in the air and look around your house and step back for a moment and say, how's my husband and my kids doing? How are they doing? Now listen, that's not going to be perfect. So don't be looking for gold paved roads and a shiny floor and, listen, I get it. But just ask yourself that. How do my kids and my husband look? Because that'll be somewhat determinative of how I'm guarding and managing my home. And it also may be a reflection upon the man too, but just to make this point strong, it'll also be how you're guarding the home, keeping the home, managing the home. And ladies, I want you to manage well. It's like the manager who gives all those things to his to all his servants, and they make a return on it. And that's what I want you to be. I want you to say, Lord, you gave me these kids, you gave me these husband. You just even gave me this house. Yeah, a house that I use for the church. Louise, even just your own house. You're not raising kids right now or doing that, but you've been given a home. You've all been given something. And how you manage it, how you guard it, how you keep it, make a return on it. Whether it's 1 or it's 2 or it's 5 or it's 10, make a return on it. So those are the shape, but there's a few characteristics I want to end on. I'm going to read a lot of these because we're running on time and we don't need to go another hour. So I'm going to read a number of these. So you guys can flip to these. I'll give you the verses, but you can also hear these too. These are all in Proverbs. So here's what I think are some responding characteristics to the ways that you ladies have been made. Because I think the things that we just laid out are it's like your DNA structure, right? This is how you were made. It's not something you're just to do. God made you this way, and that's how you function. But here, I think these are characteristics that allow you the ability to use those things God has made you and to return the profit and to shine as lights. And these are just a few. I had 10 and I chose 5 of these because these were ones I thought would be useful. So the first one is, and ladies, and this will get kind of to the last couple too we just talked about. Ladies in Scripture are industrious. That's kind of a weird term to use for women because we think of men as being industrious. But here's some of these passages here in Proverbs. Proverbs 14:1. The wisest of women builds her house, but Folly with her own hands tears it down. Over to Proverbs 31. Hear this beginning in 13. Just speaking of the excellent wife. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She's like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar, or she's got to go get it. She's got to be industrious. She rises while it is yet night. She's getting up before everybody else. Provided food for her household and portions for her maidens. She's even providing for the other women. Listen, she considers a field, she buys it. With the fruit of her hand, she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength. Here's those good works that show the modest woman right here, right? She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out. And where do you think Jesus draws on the lamp imagery for the women? He draws right here from the Proverbs, right? Industrious women. Ladies, listen to that. That does not sound like the characterized, boxed version that sometimes you get in Christianity. Yes, is the home the place where the woman is to shine? Yes, but is it absolute? Well, by no means. Because let me ask you this, right? Brethren, listen. Here's why this happens in Christianity. And this happens to, honestly, I think people of my own age who teach. And I recognize this as one of our own shortcomings, is because I'm young. I have a wife and 5 kids right now. What is my main focus right now? To raise children, to my wife to raise great children that are in the faith. And that is my central goal right now as a family unit. My wife and I to raise godly children, right? And for most of you, that's fine. You have one focus, don't have 20 million, have one in your home. But what happens when your children start to grow up? And what do you do if the kids are out of the house? What do you do before you have children? I mean, is the wife just supposed to be like, all right, I just mopped the floor for the 20th time. It's like so clean you could literally lick food off of it. I mean, we need to understand that it's not some cookie cutter box version of what a woman is supposed to do. But I'll tell you this, when she starts to seek things outside of her house, who is it for? Her house. It's for the good of her own people. So yes, is the woman's only place ever in history to be kitchen, never outside the front door, sometimes in the back on a good day. She can go outside and play with the kids, right? No. But when she does go out, brethren, you know who she has in mind? She's got her house in mind. She's building it. And she's building up the people. She's taking care of the people she's brought. If you have servants in your home, you know why you have servants in your home? These are poor people. Brethren, these are poor people who need a job, and you are providing sustenance to them because they work for you. They're doing something. I mean, just think about all the different avenues, ladies, that you can take down later in life or that you can now. I mean, you have ability to be the proverbial woman without being like, well, I'm not raising a 5-year-old. Go build your house. Provide for the people of this church first and foremost. I mean, build God's house. Build your family up. I mean, be focused on your home. Be focused on your people. Look around at the faces on here and say, if there's any money I'm giving to a good cause, if there's any time I'm giving to charity, if there's anything that I'm doing to better other people, you know who I'm going to first? I'm going to my own. I mean, brother, I don't know if you guys ever know the story of, why am I blanking? What was that baseball player? We watched a documentary on him. Why can't I think of it? Maybe it was Ted Williams. I think it was Ted Williams. Okay, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think it was Ted Williams. And I don't know if you guys ever know this. Ted Williams is a famous baseball player, amazing baseball player. Ted Williams was also a huge atheist. One of the first few players ever to really be outspoken about just not like hating it, right? And you know what he gave in interviews after he retired from baseball? You know why? Why he said, now, we all know why, right? He's sinful, he's depraved, he hates God. I mean, right, I know all the Reformed answers and they're all true. But you know one of the reasons why he said he hated it? Because of his mom. His mom was a Christian woman who devoted her entire life to Salvation Army. And this was like back in the day when Salvation Army was, I mean, yeah, they were doing the same things they do now, but still had a little bit more like, I guess, firmness to them, and they weren't jellyfish. And you think, how could he hate his mom for sacrificing so much of her life to help people? I mean, that seems like a good thing, right? And you know what he said? My mom was never around for me. My mom never poured in for me. My dad was terrible. And you know what my mom did instead of taking care of the home, taking care of me, of being an industrious wife and a mother? She went off and she helped everyone else under the sun but her own son. Now, brethren, listen. This does not mean I'm trying to get any of us in here to not think outwardly. That would be unbiblical. But listen to me on this. I mean, Paul says, if you can't take care of your own house, what are you worse than? An infidel, an unbeliever. We need to take that for the face value for what it is. Brethren, you could go love everyone in Nepal, everyone in Myanmar, you go everywhere across the world and forsake your own family and to build up your house. I mean, and brother, it's not going to do you any good. That's not a good work before God to let your family rot and your house rot. And so one of those characteristics is, listen, ladies, be industrious. I mean, some of you probably have minds in here and ability to do things and to work things and be industrious that might even be better than the men in here. I mean, we shouldn't be baffled at the idea that a woman could do that. But what's she supposed to use it for? Her career? No. She's supposed to build her house with that. I mean, sisters, you find yourself having an ability to go out and to invest for your house, to buy for your house, to seek after your house, go out into the world. I mean, you're going off on merchant ships. I mean, you're doing all these things, but you're doing it for your house. You're seeking the good of your people. And brethren, you're seeking the good of the church. That's a good responding characteristic for how you nurture and love and help in this dominion that we're taking. Be industrious. Be strong, industrious women. Second, and this ties into this, Proverbs 19:14. 19:14. House and wealth are inherited from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. What does it mean to be prudent? What? It's a good synonym to be wise. What does prudent mean? She said wise. I mean, there's other. Anyone else have anything else? Wise. Say that again. I'm sorry. How so?
I don't want to say particular, but I pass.
That's okay. Prudent can be used in some ways in a negative connotation, but it's often used in a positive way. So wise is right. Let me ask this question: how is she wise? What is prudence? What's the thing that it's what's it noting to you if to say, well, that woman's wise? Well, how is she wise? How is she displaying wisdom and being prudent? Okay, yes, careful is a good word, so I'll use another word. I'll just shine some light on this. Careful is a good word. Thoughtful, right? So yes, wisdom, yes, abound in wisdom, but the wisdom that prudence has is that it's thoughtful. And careful is actually a really good synonym too. It's being able to apply wisdom in such a way that it's able to look down the road, right? Prudence shows foresight, right? Because brethren, listen, how many of you do I need to instill wisdom to say, hey, tonight when you guys leave the house, maybe instead of parking your car here and walking home, and maybe you should walk down, go pass through the north side of town first before you get home. How many of you do I have to instill wisdom into to tell you to not do that? None of you. You already see the people that walk down here. You're going to walk past even more kind of people like that, walking that way. I don't have to instill that kind of wisdom to you, but that doesn't take a lot of foresight to know. I stay out of certain parts of town during certain hours of the day. That's like basic wisdom, right? Foresight is being able to perceive and anticipate. It's to be thoughtful with what you're doing. So a prudent wife is showing, yes, wisdom. I mean, you guys all said wisdom, but it's to do it carefully, right? You can be wise in one sense and be like, oh, I'm going to make this decision, but you're thinking, how does this decision affect my family? How does it affect me? How does it affect the church down the road? And so notice this, and here's why I think that these are paired together, because you think this is kind of a weird thing, right? House and wealth inherited from fathers, but a prudent wife's from the Lord, right? So, I mean, obviously the idea is to say, okay, people can inherit house and wealth in a whole number of different ways, right? But a prudent wife is a gift from the Lord because she displays a level of wisdom that I think comes from the Lord. The prudent wife is a gift because she has imbibed proverbial wisdom, and now she has foresight. She's prudent with her resources. She's prudent with her time. Why does the woman get up early in the morning? She goes, because if I don't, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. And then what happens by the end of the day? It's the snowball effect, but you know what that is? That's prudence. That's foresight. That's not just thinking, well, I'll get up early. Then well, I'll do this. Well, then I'll do that. You may display wisdom in every one of those decisions, but you're not thinking ahead. You're thinking on your toes. Prudence says it's able to stand back calmly and carefully and say, I think I'm going to do this because, if I do this, I see the interest that builds up. Like, what happens if for the next month I get up earlier and I take care of my household things in the morning, I prepare my kids for the day, I have my day planned out and mapped out. Now listen, that is going to look different in different ways for different people, but just hear me out on the generality. What kind of fruit will that yield in one day? I mean, a little bit, right? You'll feel good. Who doesn't feel good about getting up early? I mean, no one feels great. How do you feel like in the middle of the day or at the end of the day? I mean, you're tired, but man, you feel great. Accomplished something. But how would you feel 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Brethren, that is prudence. And ladies, that's prudence. Think about your house that way. Now, obviously, your house is not a bank. Your house is not some emotionless field, but you need to think, how do I build my house? Well, how am I investing in it so that the yield is compounding, the interest is compounding? I'm planning carefully and thoughtfully so that my return is not just I put $1 in, I got $1 out. It's like I put $1 in, I got $1 million out. Yeah, because I was prudent, I was careful, I planned my time. So I think prudence is one of them. And that is something that the woman is characterized by. That is a gift from the Lord right there, because that's a woman who's doing what? She's applying kingly wisdom. She's acting like a queen. She's acting like someone who knows how to rule her house well. Okay, so next one, trustworthy. Proverbs 31, and then we're going to finish in Proverbs 31 with these last few, and then I promise I'll wrap up. Proverbs 31, here in verse 11, I'm going to read this. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. Now this one's going to seem super basic, but I'm going to ask you, how's your marriage going to be if you lack trust? Even to the slightest degree, brethren. Even if 9 times out of 10 you trust your spouse with something, but on that one thing you just, it's either you got to stop yourself from maybe interjecting or stepping in, right? Coming in and, micromanaging the situation. Or maybe it's I hope he doesn't do that. Hope she doesn't do that. You don't trust. There's no trust there. I mean, so brother, we know even just a little bit of distrust in the marriage can cause great dissension. Just rifting the marriage apart. It's like the epicenter of an earthquake, just tearing up the ground beneath you. And here he says, the heart of her husband trusts in her. I mean, brethren, this isn't, when we think of heart, we think, oh, he just has this overwhelming emotion and sense of just love that pours out in trust. Brethren, this is the seat of the emotions. He does not doubt her. He does not doubt her. In the seat, in the throne room of his emotions, the heart of her husband trusts in her. Nothing's pulling him one way or the other. He is set in his trust for her. And it says this, she does him good and not harm all the days of her life. I mean, brethren, listen. You know whether or not you have it. So the question is if you don't, and even if you don't have it to the degree that you want it to be, I mean, yeah, the other two are important. Man, scrap the other two if you don't have this one. I mean, you're not building an industrious and you're not going to be prudent in your house. You don't have trust. I mean, a trustworthy wife is one in which the husband is not moved in his trust. And obviously that's going to play out vice versa. Why is she going to do good to a man she does not trust? I mean, you can see the inverse of this all day long. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life because she trusts him. She says, that man I love because he has loved me, right? He loves me well, right? That's gonna correspond. But ladies, be absolutely trustworthy in your home. Absolutely trustworthy in your home. And you know what, ladies? Us men will have much. We have much to apologize for in our lives because you are entrusted to men who are not like Christ, Folly. We will not only blunder and drop the ball and make mistakes, we will sin against you at times that is going to hurt. Hurt in a way that says you ought not to be treated that way. But you know what? Don't become, because this happens. Here's where it begins in marriages. You begin to think in your heart before you say it to others. You begin to think less of your spouse. You begin to think less of your husband. And then it starts to come out, praying with each other with the ladies. You don't want to talk about it in front of the ladies, but then you start praying, Lord, just really help my husband. He's really struggling. Right out in front of everybody to just know without any, no context, no one-on-one discussion. Now you just can't let it out. Now it's, Lord, please help my husband. He's going through trials with his sins and everything. Whoa, it's like, and then before or not, it's, man, I really wish he was like this. Really wish he was like that. And just trust is just slipping away. And you know what? That you imagine, whether he hears it or not, but you imagine that trust is going to erode in that home whether he hears it or not. And imagine if he does. I mean, this is a side note, but ladies, the way that is trustworthy is, even when your man, because I will, for my own wife, be a big, blumbering idiot at times. And I don't mean that lightly, just a big idiot sometimes. You need to remember that trust is going to be maintained with the respect that you show your husband, even when he's an imperfect man. Very imperfect man at sometimes. And that's what men run on. And that's where that trust is going to lie. Men want to, no man in here cares about how much sappy love he gets all the time. Some more, some less. But you know what men will? In a dime. I've seen men cry who don't get shown respect. Right? Who are not shown respect when they think they deserve it. Now, some men don't, some men do. But ladies, all I'm trying to say is be trustworthy. One way you can begin to do that is just think and speak well of your husband. Doesn't mean ignoring his sins, but that means taking them to God and not taking them to others. And listen, that doesn't mean at times there's not counsel, all those different things, but you know the difference between out seeking out help and just wanting to get a word out of your mouth because you just can't bear him anymore. You just got to get a word out. Be trustworthy. Your husband, you will do good to him the whole life, and you will shine very gloriously, and your husband will never be put to shame. Another one here, 19 and 20. Just scroll down a little bit. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. Manny talked a lot about to the poor and to the needy the other week. Very interesting that the proverbial woman is one who holds her hands out to the needy. She puts her hands to work and opens her hand and reaches out her hand to the needy. Why? Because she has something to offer them. She's able to give to the needy. And listen, ladies, this means not just because you do it because the Bible says take care of the poor and the needy. Yes, it's because you are compassionate. I mean, you think about all the things like in our country, and this even comes up in statistics and stuff, right? Of who is more likely to want to have a welfare program or some kind of welfare that is given to people who are poor and in need and can sign up to receive something. You know who the vast majority of it are in higher percentages of in favor of that versus not in favor of that? It's always women. And that's because part of a woman's heart is to show compassion, or at least it ought to be. Women look upon the plight of people and are often, and this is just a general truth, looking out at nature, they are often more compassionate than men. Men can be very quick to be cold because men can be very, not deserving. Next, move. Men can be very decisive in that, very calculated, and in some ways that can be good, but in some ways that can be very bad. And ladies, you are to look out to the poor and to needy, and just like Christ was to the poor and the needy, he was compassionate upon them. He held out his hand to them, and you ought to have compassion on those who are needy and who are poor. And listen, sometimes that means looking to your own kids. When you're frustrated with them, you're up to your neck in frustration. I mean, your children are needy. They're just people who need lots of compassion because they're needy. I'll just leave it at that. Kids are needy. Obviously, that can extend to many different things, but ladies, compassion is one of those responding characteristics. And lastly, this. Proverbs 31:21-22. Right there in the following verses, she is not afraid of snow for her household, and for all her household are clothed in scarlet. Or you have a note there, right there, in double thickness, right? So there's a play on the Hebrew there. She's not afraid of snow for her household. Why? All her household are dressed appropriately, right? And I would say there's a connotation that they're dressed in a way that it's not ragtag. I think that's why there's the play on here of the scarlet, or is it in double thick linen? Well, I don't think you have to choose one or the other. I think the idea is, one, they're dressed appropriately for the cold. And as he says right here, she makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. And that is this, ladies. One way you can correspond this in characters is to dignify your house by doing dignifying things. Now, we'll qualify this one because just buying expensive things that your family may need and that may provide some level of comfort for your family does not mean you're dignified. But we ought not forget what's being said right here is, why is she not afraid of snow, brethren? Well, she's prepared and but listen though, like, you could not be afraid of snow and then tell your family, hey, y'all, we're just gonna buck up and everyone bundle close, right around the candle. And listen, in survival mode, you do what you can. I am not knocking anyone's circumstances here. Sometimes we get into some territory that can really touch, and I'm not trying to make any judgment calls on anyone's previous situations before, but we have to be able to look at this and say, ways in which we can grow in this. She's not afraid of snow. One, not because she simply tries to provide to take care of the needs. Brethren, she goes above and beyond to make sure that they're not afraid of it. It's not even a concern. The snow comes, they're clothed in double linen, or as it says, clothed in scarlet. And I think also too, they're not clothed in every blanket that she could just, rummage out of, storage or the cabinet. I have a few extra towels here that we used to dry off after a shower. Here, bundle up with these. Now go to school. Or here, now go to work with this. She's dressing them appropriately, and she's dressing them in a way that dignifies them too, and dignifies the house. It brings dignity to it. I mean, brethren, listen. Though it's a sad reality, you think about, if you grew up and you went to public school. And some of us went to public schools in better areas of town, but if you ever went to a public school in a really bad place, and I'm sure, brethren, you'll see this as you're at your school now, there's going to be kids who you can know have more money or less money just upon the way that they're dressed. I mean, if you let your kid run around when you have the means to provide for them in ragtag clothing, dirty, shoes untied, falling apart, pockets hanging out because they have holes in them and they're useless now. Brethren, we obviously would look at someone who can't provide for their child in that situation because they just literally can't, and we have compassion on them, right? Provide for the poor and needy. But the proverbial woman says that when she dignifies her house and adorns it, when she has the ability and the means to do it, she does it in a way that isn't just saying, well, let's slap a bunch of Band-Aids onto this and whatever we can throw together. It's appropriate for the situation, and it's one in which there's not embarrassment or shame brought about. It's not like, oh, there goes that, it's, if you're ever, I won't use that as an example. I'll just save myself from that. Let's just say, there's the Johnsons. There they go. Their kids just... Look at that. He's got a hand-me-down stitched together. That looks like towels knitted together as a jacket, kind of thing. Now, I don't think you should make fun of people for that. But you do recognize to some extent that there's something lacking there. And when the means to provide is there, we should do it in a way that dignifies, that where the outside matches what we are trying to do to our household. And so, ladies, listen, obviously to the best of your ability, you don't have to go buy name brand stuff and all these different things, but seek to do to the best of your ability to dignify your house. So that in those circumstances, you will bring dignity and honor and love to your home. So I have a number of other things on here, but I can save these because we're way over time. So I want to pray. If anyone wants to stick around, I have a few extra things on here we could talk about. We don't have to. We could also address next time. So if you guys have questions, please feel free to ask them when we're done. But let me go ahead and close us in prayer, and then we will be officially done tonight.